That big story this evening, unions, NUMSA and the Cabin Crew Association are concerned about the lack of consultation by the Department of Public Enterprises with regards to the restructuring of SAA. Both unions have called on the department to engage with Labour. This comes after Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan announced plans to radically restructure the struggling national airline. For more on this story, we are now joined by Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of the organisation Outdoing Tax Abuse, better known as OUTA. Good evening and welcome to The Full View. Your take on this announcement by the Public Enterprises Minister?
Yeah, we agree, and we believe that the airline is indeed in need of a restructuring, a radical one or a drastic one, as they put it. I'm sure that he's not going to proceed with that without engaging with Labour. I mean, there are laws around that as well. So he recently just made the statement. I think the public and just in general society and business have been calling for a restructuring, a radical one, for a number of years now. So it's good that we start hearing those calls, because something has to happen. It cannot be business as usual. Not under these circumstances. We are certainly tired as the public of bailing out this state and entity, which is one that the country doesn't even need.
But what does radical restructuring even mean?
Well, it means cutting deep. It means probably they're about 20% overstaffed. It looks like they need to remove about 2,000 staff. So that's radical stuff. And they're
starting with the 944 that was announced earlier.
Yeah, we believe that's not enough. So they need to go a lot deeper. If you compare SAA to an airline like Air New Zealand, also at the end of a route, Air New Zealand's got double the amount of aircraft, making profits with only 20% more staff. So you can see that a lot of staff need to be removed. But not only that, there are a lot of contracts that need to be reviewed. There are a lot of business entities within SAA, such as air chefs and other entities that probably need to be looked at. And I think we're asking the question as the public: should government be in the business of business? Because they just cannot compete with other airlines.
Going back to the point that you raised now around the unions, that obviously the department would have to consult the unions. But then what would you think necessitated or put the minister under pressure to release this statement even before there's been an engagement with the unions? Because the unions say that we have been, it's a shock to them that there is this restructuring process that is underway, or plans at least to radically restructure SAA, and there was no consultation.
Well, I don't think one needs to consult. What the shareholders and the management need to do is have the discussion and start to put some plans together, some high-level plans first, and then the consultation needs to take place.
But why release the statement?
Well, because I think it's a pretty obvious thing, and if you're going to get the ball rolling, you need to make statements, and then you start the ball. You've got a lot of suppliers out there. Remember as well, you've got people doing business with SAA, such as I think it's Travel Centre and insurers, that are now pulling back and starting to pull away from SAA. Now you want to avert that. You want to send the message out to those entities: don't back down on us, don't leave us. We're going to go through this modification of the organisation and restructuring so that we can keep it alive. Otherwise you'll have more people departing from the airline.
So I wouldn't be too far off by assuming that the reason that the minister would release such a statement is actually also to reassure even lenders that he's been trying to call up to help SAA out, help SAA secure this 2 billion, the 2 billion that the airline needs, to reassure them that we are busy trying to restructure, and radically so, SAA.
Yeah, look, I imagine, we don't know what his reasons are, but that must come into the fold. There must be some strong messages that he has to send out. It cannot be business as usual. He's got to make some hard statements. I think Dudu Myeni also alluded to that just a couple of weeks ago. So this is not the first time we've heard that. It's nice now that we hear government taking this matter seriously, but we want to see action. Obviously, the saddest thing is that people in this environment have to lose their jobs. That's the last thing we want. But if you don't cull and go cut deep now, you have a situation where more people lose their jobs. In fact, maybe everybody loses their jobs.
You mentioned earlier on that government shouldn't be in the business of business. And I don't know if you saw the Sunday Times yesterday, a report that the Sunday Times have of a document that was drafted by the former CEO of SAA, Wayne. And in that document, the recommendation that is also made is that government should leave the business of airline.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we see this far too often, that governments are notoriously bad at running efficient systems, and airlines, Danel's another one. We saw they had to sell off their big stakes and privatize Telkom. Had they not done that, Telkom would have been dead by now. So, it's not a critical function like Eskom, which is too big to fail. We have to keep that alive. The country depends on it. The country does not depend on SAA. If SAA wasn't here tomorrow, those flights and those seats would be taken up very quickly.
Someone else that we had this conversation with, and his argument was that when we speak about SAA, we shouldn't just speak about SAA as an airline that flies people. It's not about an elitist form of transportation, but rather all the jobs that would be affected through, for instance, a radical restructuring of SAA. If you speak about, for instance, the mechanical engineers, for instance, the technical guys, if you speak about the cleaners, for instance, those are the people who would also lose their jobs, and that needs to be factored in.
Of course it does. As I said earlier, it's the sad reality when something goes wrong like this is people's jobs are at stake here. The reality, though, is that if you don't do something, all their jobs are going to be at stake. Now, the way you do this is to ease out of the airline into a privatized or semi-privatized matter so that most of the jobs can be kept. Some of the jobs are going to go to another airline that might start up, or other airlines that come in and take over a lot of those jobs anyway. So it's not like everybody just becomes unemployed, because there are seats that have to be taken up. So they'll need air crew, they'll need pilots, they'll need all the supply services that go into that.
So even a partial privatization of SAA, do you think that would work?
I think it could, but the chances of that are running out rapidly. I don't think anybody's going to throw any money at this. So they need to work very hard to find a solution, hopefully find an equity partner, but the laws here are quite strict. You can't have more than 50% in foreign hands or for a local airline. I don't know how they'll get around that. And who's going to want a 49% share in an airline if they cannot control it? Nobody's going to take over airline.
Hey, listen, the finance minister said, sell SAA, but then business people in SA must start their own airline.
Yeah, I mean, imagine there is room for additional airlines. One time have gone, Nationwide have gone. There have been a number of them. SAA, more and more people are moving away from them. So there's an opportunity for one or even two.
Let's speak about the role of the shareholder at this point. Do you think that the shareholder should take some of the blame for where SAA finds itself?
Absolutely. The shareholder has been interfering far too much in SAA. SAA has made profits in the past. You must remember that, when there was less interference. But so you cannot have these state-owned institutions where they need to make hard and tough decisions. For instance, last year, Eskom was on the brink of making a decision not to give increases, and then the politicians interfered again because it wasn't going to be good for the elections. And this happens far too much in the administration of this country, and certainly in our SOEs, which is why most of them are defunct. If they were run properly, like businesses, and made decisions without the interference of politicians, I can assure you most of them would be well off, but they're not.
Actually, the Telkom CEO once wrote an opinion piece or was quoted rather in one of the dailies, saying that one of the problems that you have with the shareholder is, for instance, the interference and making the example that if you look at, for instance, what has happened at Eskom, that even at Eskom there was an announcement that there will be a 0% increase last year. Then the shareholder intervened and everything had to change.
Exactly what I said, yeah. And we find this, by the way, government interference right down to local government level. So it's everywhere. Our government interferes far too much, whether it's for profit-making, cronyism, motives, whatever they are, there's far too much interference.
Is it possible to create a model out of SAA where there is no interference at all?
Yeah, I think they've been able to do it in the past. You know, it's been a government airline all along, and it's made profit, and there has been little interference. I think government needs to step in when there are bilateral agreements, for instance, between different countries, but that's as far as it goes. The airline needs to, look, for instance, where the airline was on the verge of doing a great deal in Europe with, I think it was Emirates, and then supposedly, or it was reported that Jacob Zuma interfered through Dudu Myeni, and they had to pull out that deal. Now, that deal would have saved SAA billions of rands because it was a good deal for the airline. And unfortunately, they've moved on from that. And
speaking about Dudu Myeni, that High Court ruling, your response to that, your reaction as OUTA?
Yeah, I think the court got it right. The judges in law is ruling correctly. These are interlocutory challenges. These are the little skirmishes before the big matter, which comes to court in January. So she wanted to have a joint application for us to bring all the board members on board. We're not saying the board is delinquent. We're saying she's delinquent. Doesn't mean to say we won't go after the other board members, but we're starting off with the chairperson. The next part
does
of the
that mean that you will be going after the other board members?
It depends. I think what we're doing, and we're engaging with state-owned entities and saying to the existing boards, it is your role to actually do that, because so SAA's current board, they've got the contracts, they've got the minutes of all the meetings. It's very difficult for civil society to be fighting these fights when in actual fact the authorities should be doing it. So we pick our cases. We don't have a lot of money. We need to be very careful in how we spend our supporters' money, and this was a case that we believed had to be taken on. But doesn't mean to say we won't take on the others, but we're asking the boards of those state-owned entities as well as Eskom and others to go and do their job and hold those previous board members to account.
Wayne Duvenage, thank you so much for your
Pleasure.
time. The OUTA CEO. Let's just quickly go to Tepiso.